Nelson. Okay. Couple questions were raised last time, and I promised to do a little research. One of them related to levirate marriage in other cultures. And indeed, Professor Google has a very long article which tells me that it did and still does exist in certain places. So, for instance, in Eurasia, in other words, in that area that used to be the Soviet Union, Kazakhstan, and etc., those areas, I see that during the Second World War, they did practice that in Central Asia. Obviously, soldiers were killed, widows were left. Apparently, in many of these cases, it's not a question of having no children. If the children were little, then they did have the brother-in-law of the widow marry the widow. Also in India, it's still popular in certain rural areas. Kurdistan, it's very common among the Kurds. In Africa, also in Somalia, and some parts of Nigeria, and in South Sudan, among especially the Dinka and Nuer people, and in Zimbabwe, among the Shona people. So it's still practiced in both Asia and Africa, though very, very limited. I also found in Pew Center did a study about polygamy, and found that only 2% of the global population lives in polygamous households. Most cases, in most countries, less than 0.5%. It's prohibited, as we know, in most places. They found most of it is in sub-Saharan Africa, where 11% of the population has more than one spouse. Fewer than 1% of Muslim men live with more than one spouse in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Iran, and Egypt. Obviously, we know in Saudi Arabia and in the United Arab Emirates and Qatar, these sheiks come with, I remember reading when they would come to the Cleveland Clinic, where the clinic established a whole floor just for these Arab sheiks to come with their harems. And these harems would go shopping. And the malls, Saks and Nordstrom and so forth, were delighted with these visitors. I think 9/11 kind of limited this, and of course the clinic established the hospital in Abu Dhabi. So these sheiks can go to Abu Dhabi and get the clinic doctors. I was surprised to see that, according to a recent Gallup poll, 1 in 5 adults in the United States believe that polygamy is morally acceptable. That's very high percentage. In fact, when it was first asked, that question was first asked 19 years ago, it was 7%. Now it's 20%, which doesn't necessarily mean that people are doing it, but they don't object to it, which surprised me very much. One other question related to Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, and I did check in the Babylonian Talmud, and apparently the issue doesn't come up, and instead what they're arguing back and forth is the position of Beit Shammai. The Jerusalem Talmud, in contrast to the Babylonian Talmud, obviously it's misnomer. It's not Jerusalem. The Jews didn't live in Jerusalem in the time of the Talmud. They weren't permitted to. They lived in the Galilee. And so we should really call it the Palestinian Talmud and not the Jerusalem Talmud. But it's normally called Talmud Yerushalmi. The Jerusalem Talmud presents an opinion that Rabbi Elazar ben Arach says that the betrothal only is a complete acquisition of the widow in a levirate marriage. And all you need is the betrothal. According to his opinion, it's a complete relationship. However, in the Jerusalem Talmud, it says Beit Shammai doesn't agree with this. It's explained that Beit Shammai's opinion is the same as Rabbi Shimon's opinion, and this is that these bonds are sufficiently effective to prevent the creation of a bond with another woman, that is, with the sister of the widow, but are not sufficient to nullify the bond completely. And therefore, if the brother-in-law later wants to divorce the woman to whom he had been betrothed but not married, just the betrothal, she requires chalitza. So I just mentioned this to show that what the Talmud is doing is just adding on complexity to the Mishnah and dealing with these various Mishnayot that on the surface don't fit neatly. But as this Google article points out, in Judaism, let me quote it, Jewish custom has seen a gradual decline of yibum in favor of chalitza, to the point where in most contemporary Jewish communities and in Israel by mandate of the chief rabbinate, yibum is prohibited. We saw that already starting in the Talmud. So even though the Mishnah, and now I'm telling you, the Talmud just adds to it, this is basically a theoretical discussion, because increasingly yibum was not practiced. Any questions? Yes, Nelson, please.
In consulting with Rabbi Google,
Yes.
and live
Oh,
by.
you call him rabbi, I call him professor. Okay.
No. He was not ordained. I understand. Professor Google, was there any discussion of incest in these other cultures? What is incest?
I didn't check it, but I'm sure there is. Incest, I think, is pretty universal in terms of. But I will ask him, and he will tell me. He's really very knowledgeable.
Thank you.
Hi, Steve. Okay. Um, so uh, we did see last time that the when in this case Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, um, uh, in the case of let's see, yes, in the case of three brothers, two of whom were married to two sisters, and the third brother was not married, mufneh. He was free. He was unoccupied. And the following occurred. Mate echad mi ba'alei achayot. One of the husbands of one of the sisters died before there were any children. And the unmarried man, the single man, betrothed her. But after that, his second brother, who was married to the other sister, then dies. Beit Shammai says, Ishto imo. That is, the first wife, the one the first sister, stays with him. The Hala and the other one has to it can say goes out literally, and because she is a sister, and a man can't marry two sisters. But Beit Hillel says no, the other way around. The first wife, the one that he betrothed but did not officially marry, he has to give her a get, and she does the chalitza, breaking the tie. And according to Beit Shammai, also Beit Hillel rather, also the second widow has to do chalitza, and he can't marry either sister. And the Mishnah ends with this proverb that is, woe unto him for his wife, and woe unto him for the wife of his brother. He loses them both. Why? So, according to Beit Shammai, he says the wife remains, the first one, he betrothed, and this betrothal for Beit Shammai has a relationship. It may, as the Jerusalem Talmud shows, it may not be complete, but it is a relationship, and he can marry her, finish the process, and marry her. This other woman then has to leave. That is, he can't marry two sisters, and she's exempt from everything because she is the sister. So we don't have to do chalitza. We certainly can't do yibum. But because it's her sister who's married, there is no connection. There is no zukika. Beit Hillel says, no, it's only betrothal. It's not a full marriage. And so, according to Beit Hillel, the first woman has, he is, since he has not yet entered into marriage, complete marriage, it's only been betrothal, he is required to perform levirate marriage with both women, but he can't. Therefore, he has to divorce his wife, the one to whom he was betrothed, okay, but not yet married, with a get. That then cuts the relationship between him and the widow of his brother. That cuts it. And by chalitza, that cuts the levirate bond. He's no longer committed to her. The betrothal is cut with the get. The chalitza cuts the levirate bond. And he sends away the wife of the second brother, the widow of the second brother also. In other words, he's left, according to Beit Hillel, he still has neither sister-in-law, but of course he can marry someone else.
I don't remember, excuse.
Yeah.
Someone does, if a woman's husband dies and she does chalitza, is she still eligible to marry a Kohen? She's a widow, or is she considered a divorcee and not able to marry a Kohen? And
no, chalitza is not equivalent to divorce.
So in this case, the first woman whose husband died, she was engaged, and then according to Beit Hillel, she gets a get and chalitza. Can she marry a Kohen?
No, because she got a get. But the second sister could, because there was no betrothal. The betrothal is enough to require a get, even though they've never slept together and the relationship is not complete. It requires a get. Everybody agrees with that. That's not a dispute. And so she could not marry a Kohen. She is a divorcee. Other questions?
So yeah, so the Mishnah should say at the end, oi la,
Yeah.
I didn't understand.
So the Mishnah ends, oi la.
Yes, to the man. Yes.
To the man and to the wife and to the wife of his brother, right? So I guess that's her, right?
Yeah, well.
Yeah, she's divorced.
If she's divorced, yes. She can marry a Levi or an Israel without a problem. It's just a Kohen. Yes, Aaron.
If she gets a get, is there any financial, does she get anything like, she doesn't have a.
Interesting question. I believe she does.
Yeah, this is in Daf Yomi right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a big machloket about it.
Oh yeah, well.
About I think the 200 or the 100 zuz, in this case it would be 100 zuz, I think is not in question, but if the husband wrote extra money in the get, in the ketubah, and they never made it to actually get married, then I think the extra money is not owed.
But the basic 100 is.
I think I don't remember for sure. It's the last.
Well, these as with I don't know what the halacha is, but in most of these cases there is a dispute and complications, and one of the fascinating things is that if you want to know the bottom line, what is the law, in most cases, the Talmud doesn't tell you. You have to look in the codes. and they don't necessarily agree. Rambam, in his Mishnah Torah, they're interesting in one of these cases. Rambam in the Mishnah Torah gives one opinion. In his commentary to the Mishnah, he gives another opinion. And so one of the fun things that people who have nothing else to do argue about is to figure out, to explain how come he explains one way in the in his commentary to the Mishnah and another way in the Mishnah Torah. Regrettably, that's what has happened to the Mishnah Torah outside of the Yemenite community. It is not authoritative either for Sephardic Jews or Ashkenazic Jews. We paskin according to the Shulchan Aruch, and for Ashkenazic Jews, it's the Ramah, Isserless opinion that we follow, not the Mechaber, not Yosef Karo's. And so Sephardic and Ashkenazic students use the Mishnah Torah as a way of kind of arguing. Well, how could he say this if he says that? So that is I regret to say that is the fate of the Mishnah Torah outside of the Yemenite community. The Yemenite community, because of Rambam's special connection with them, Igeret Teiman, a well-known letter, a tshuva that Rambam wrote to the Yemenites. So they follow Mishnah Torah, but not other communities. Any questions? Okay, let's go back to the next Mishnah. Oops, okay. Mishnah 6. Again, 3 brothers, 2 of them married to 2 sisters. The third one is married, but he's married, it says here, nochrit. Nochri usually means somebody who isn't Jewish. But in this case, it means someone who is not related to the other women. He's married to not a relative. So 2 of the brothers married 2 sisters. The third brother is married, but not to the sisters. He's married to another woman. One of the men, one of the brothers who was married to one of the sisters dies. And what happens? The one who was married not to a sister, but the third brother marries Chanas. He performs Yibum on the widow. And what happens? Before they have children, he dies. What happens? So the Mishnah says, Harishona yotz'a mishum achot isha. The first sister, yotz'a, translated here as dismissed. She goes out. Mishum achot isha. Because prohibited, she is the sister of a wife. And the second one is a rival wife. So the deceased brother's wife, the husband of one of the sisters died, and the brother who was married to the unrelated woman married, that is, performed a levirate marriage with the deceased brother's wife, but he died before they could have children. In this situation, the surviving brother is married to the woman's sister. The brother who was not married to a sister married and then died. So now we have one of the sisters now for a second time is a widow without children. She then would be required to marry the surviving brother, but that surviving brother is married to her sister. So the first woman is dismissed due to the prohibition proscribing the sister of one's wife, for she is the sister of this surviving brother's wife. The second woman is dismissed due to her status as the first woman's rival wife. The commentary is, following the first levirate marriage, this second woman became the rival wife of the sister. She wasn't originally related, but she's a co-wife because this man married someone who wasn't related and then married the sister. So she is therefore exempt from levirate marriage to the surviving brother because the surviving brother is married to her sister. If, however, the brother married to the unrelated woman performed only ma'amar, if he only performed ma'amar, if he only betrothed her and did not consummate the levirate marriage and died before he could consummate the marriage, then the unrelated woman, whose halachic status with regard to yibum is similar to that of a sister's rival wife, must perform chalitza and may not enter into levirate marriage. In the case of three brothers, let's go back to the Hebrew. Ushniya mishum tzara asa ba ma'amar. So this surviving brother doesn't complete the levirate marriage, only does betrothal, and he dies. Then the Mishnah, and here there doesn't seem to be any dispute, the Mishnah Tanakama, without a contrary opinion, this woman who is not a sister does chalitza because there was a relationship, but not a complete relationship. Then it goes on to another case. It's not another Mishnah, it's in the same Mishnah, but it gives now another case. Three brothers, two of whom married to two sisters, same as the first. And the first married to someone who isn't a sister, same case. Now we have the one who is married not to the sister, and he dies. Same. Now, instead of being one of the one of the brothers who married to a sister dies, but rather the brother who married a woman who isn't a sister. She dies. And one of the surviving brothers, who is married to one of the sisters, marries this woman, this widow, and then he dies without a child. Then what happens? Says the Mishnah, the first one goes out because she is a sister of the wife. The second one goes out because she's her rival wife. If, however, they didn't consummate the marriage and only was betrothal and he died, then the woman who is not related does chalitza because it's only ma'amar and does not have a levirate marriage. Let's go into the English here. This case, we have three brothers, two of whom were married to two sisters, one married to an unrelated woman, and the following occurred. One of the husbands of the sisters died. He was married to the unrelated woman. And he who was related to the unrelated woman married the widow. And then the wife of the second brother, the one of the sisters, died. Wait a minute. Oh, wait, I skipped something. I'm sorry. It complicates it further. I'm sorry, I skipped this middle section here.
I think they're only talking about the guys dying.
Well, but in the case of three brothers, two of whom were married to two sisters, one married to an unrelated woman, and the following occurred. One of the husbands of the sisters died. The one who was married to an unrelated woman married the widow, and then the wife of the second brother, the one of the sisters died. Let's go back into the Hebrew. Mate echad mi ba'alei ha'achayot v'chanas nasui ochrit et ishto v'met. Harishona yotz'a mishum achot isha ushniya mishum tzarata. Asa ba'ma'amar v'met nochrit choletzet v'lo mityabemet. I don't see here where it says the woman died. Do you?
No, I just see where they're talking about the husbands dying.
I think the translation is wrong. So let's go back here. One of the husbands dies. He was married to the unrelated woman, married the widow. And then the brother who was married to the unrelated woman dies. So he's got two wives. The one was not a sister. The second one was a sister of his brother's wife, the dead brother's wife. Now we have two women who he is obligated for levirate marriage. The unrelated woman and the woman who was previously prohibited because she was a sister of his deceased wife. In this case, the sister is forbidden to him forever. She is not forbidden due to her status as his wife's sister, as his wife already died. And one wife's sister is permitted after the wife's death. I don't see that. However, since she was already forbidden to him at one time, she is forbidden to him forever. When she first happened before the brothers for levirate marriage, before the third brother married her, she was forbidden to the second brother as his wife's sister. Therefore, she is forbidden to him forever. In addition, she exempts her rival wife, the unrelated woman, from levirate marriage. So here, as you can see, they just keep getting it more and more complicated, and present these hypotheticals with and then you have partial marriages, only betrothal, which means that there is a relationship, but not a complete relationship. Shammai feels it's a stronger relationship than Hillel, but both agree, at least according to the Jerusalem Talmud, that it's not a complete relationship. Again, if you want to play this out, what the commentaries do, let me go back to my text, because I don't like what this translation does. It doesn't seem to me to reflect the Hebrew. So let me read to you, translate for you the commentary. 3 brothers, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. 2 of them, that is Reuven and Shimon, are married to 2 sisters, Leah and Rachel. One of the ones married, and a third one that is Levi, is married to another woman, Sarah. Sarah is not related. She is not a sister to Leah and Rachel. She comes from another family. One of the brothers who married a sister, like for instance, Reuven, died. He's the husband of Leah, and they have no children. And the one who was married to a non-relative, that is Levi, performs yibum on Leah. And Levi also dies before Leah has any children. So now there are 2 women of his brothers, 2 widows of his brothers, Sarah and Leah, and Shimon, the surviving of the 3 brothers, should marry both of them because his brothers died. Both of his brothers died. Harishonah, the first one, that is Leah, goes out. That is no relationship. Why? She is a sister of his wife. That is, Shimon is married to her sister. The second one, who is not related, is also goes out because she was the rival wife. And therefore, there is no chalitza and no yibum, which we learned in the first chapter of Yevamot. The rival wife is exempt if the other wife is exempt. And now, if he only does betrothal, if Levi only betroths Leah and doesn't marry her, that is, he betrothed her either with kesef or shtar, with money or a document, and did not have intercourse with her, and he dies also before there are any children, this third woman, Sarah, is required to do choletzet. She does chalitza, and he does not marry her. even though, now I'm reading now the commentary, even though Leah is freed from chalitza and yibum because she is a sister of his wife, still Sarah needs chalitza for the ma'amar, the betrothal is koneh b'yavamat kinyan gamur. The betrothal makes it a complete relationship, and therefore she is not considered a rival wife, a completely rival wife, and therefore there's no yibum, because the betrothal makes her somewhat of a rival wife. Not complete, but somewhat. But she does not do yibum because the betrothal made her somewhat a rival wife. In the Gemara, it's explained that even if he didn't betroth her and died, she still does chalitza and not yibum because she is the rival wife of a sister who is has a relationship of yibum to him. And the Mishnah didn't really say asaba ma'amar, except to teach us that Beit Shammai's view is not the correct view, and she is free from chalitza. But the law is that the betrothal alone only makes a partial connection, and that is a result not of the Torah but of the rabbis, as the opinion of Hillel. Therefore, she needs chalitza. Next, 3 brothers, 2 of them married to 2 sisters, 1 married to an unrelated woman. Same example. One of the married men, the one who is married to the unrelated woman, dies without children. And one of the brothers marries, let's say it's Reuven, marries the widow, that is the widow of Levi, namely Sarah, and Reuven dies with no children. So now he's got 2 women. He's got his brother's widow, and he's got the second one, who was another brother's widow. He's got 2 widows. And the first one, that is Leah, which is the one who was married to Reuven, but there is another text that says, no, not the first, the second. In other words, we have 2 texts of the Mishnah that are completely opposite, that the second one goes out and the first one, in other words, they switch the 2. I give up. I give up. Basically, what we see here is not only is there complication within the Mishnah, but the text of the Mishnah, we have completely opposite texts. There's no dispute here between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. There are no 2 opinions, but they're 2 different texts. You have something better to do with your time? I do.
I have a question, Rabbi.
Yes, Elliot.
I find it very complicated, and I'm wondering, I don't quite understand it, but I wonder if, given the legalities or the stipulations, the halachot, would it have been possible for a man, 2 different men, to have been married to the same woman at the same time? Would that
No,
have been possible? No.
no, no,
Uh-huh.
absolutely not. No.
And I just wonder if there are any articles that would speak for men of the time and women of the time in terms of their feelings against the halachot. In other words, seems to me that there could be a lot of jealousies involved. Could there not?
Absolutely. And I'm
And
sure.
I mean, and
Absolutely.
the blindness or the lack of expression of ramifications along those lines, it really stands out to me. Where were the rabbis? Unless they came up with their halachot based on some sort of psychological ramifications of it all, even though they did not express those concerns.
They are expressed not in halacha, but I'm sure there are stories and so forth. We know, of course, from the Torah, plenty of stories of rival wives, Hannah and Penina. Hannah, the mother of Samuel. Penina had all these children, and Hannah had none. We have it with Rachel and Leah. And so there's plenty of evidence of it. What we're dealing with here is two different ways of connecting. One way is marriage. Betrothal is partial. Marriage, this is a connection requiring a get. Second is the connection of levirate. That is, the surviving brother is required to marry his brother's widow. But if there is a problem of incest, that is, there are laws that a man cannot marry his brother's sister. So that's what we're dealing with here. Two different ways of connecting and different ways of breaking the connection. The marital connection, even with only betrothal, has to be broken with a get. The yibum, the levirate connection, is broken with chalitza, but we've seen in some cases, if their relationship is forbidden to begin with because of their relationship, that is, you can't marry a woman's sister, so there's no need to break it. It's broken to begin with. You don't need to break it. It's broken. And therefore, the rules go, that's what the complicating thing is. Karen, did you want to say something?
Well, yeah, I keep looking at, other than marrying a Kohen, what would be the difference between goes out and I was making notes and trying to make a chart of Leah and everybody.
Yeah, good.
One of them I thought said no chalitza and no yibum.
Yes.
And then a different one said goes out. What would be the difference there? That sounds like the same thing to me.
No. Yes, that's right. It is the same.
So
it is.
So it's just marrying a Kohen. If she goes out, she's still, because she's a widow, not a divorcee, she can marry a Kohen. But if
Correct.
she has to get chalitza, she can't. But other than that, is there any?
Okay. It's the get.
Okay.
It's the get.
So if she gets chalitza, it's the same as goes out?
With regard to the Kohen.
Okay. So is there any difference in her life? I'm just wondering why they're being so, why not just say goes out, can't marry her or something?
No, goes out meaning doesn't require either chalitza or yibum.
Right. But if she gets chalitza, what would be the difference in her life? Or is it just a matter of taking care of things the right way?
Well, the bond, with her brother-in-law
Right,
is made if her husband dies without children,
right.
unless
So she can't.
the marriage couldn't take place because he's already married to her sister. If he's already married to her sister, then forget it.
Okay,
There's no bond. But if he's not married to his sister,
okay.
to her sister,
Okay, yeah.
he's married to somebody else, then he can marry her. And therefore there is a yibum bond
Okay,
that has to be broken.
okay, okay.
Or you do yibum. Now, in some cases, like we're reading here, they don't want you to do yibum at all. You just have to do chalitza, but you have to break that bond. Yes, Bob.
It's interesting to me that they go through such effort to come up with all these for instances, that they're missing the words or the description to just say what's covered and what isn't. I mean, what if the second brother has an illegitimate child? Is he childless? I mean, there's so many other possibilities that they can't get into, that it just seems like an academic effort to try and cover all bases, which you can't possibly do, and that they should have narrowed down what they were after and gotten the words right, and then left it to the courts to decide where everything belonged. It's just like there's no faith in the rabbis that would be overseeing these decisions to make up the right decision for that case. It just seems so preposterous to me.
You know, one of the things I'm going to do, and I'm going to show it to you next time, is how Rambam deals with this, because we who think more like Greeks than we do like Near Eastern people, we want the principles laid out, and we want it clear, you know, and then you can make sense out of it. But that's not the style of the Mishnah. And what is fascinating to me is that they lay it out like this in a very complicated way. And as I said, in the Talmud, they just add more. And it's great for your developing your logical thinking and so forth, but it's not our style. Our style would be, what are the rules? And you know, that's it. If it's like, you know, if there are certain things that have to be, and that's what it is. Anyhow,
I have a question to make this complicated situation even more so, since so many people rely on the insights of the Rambam and Hillel and Shammai. What would those three say about this Mishagayas, pardon me, about the he, she, we, you, they business? I think it would be totally foreign to them, and they probably would find it repugnant.
now who's this that you're talking about?
I'm talking about, when we're talking about the females and males, what would the Rambam and Hillel and Shammai have to say about some of these halachot applied to people and how they see their gender today, or their sexual identity? They probably consider it a bunch of going way over outside of the derech, it would seem to me. Repugnant.
No question about it. No question
I
about
mean,
it.
and so many people today, he, she, we, you, they, you got to get your pronouns straight or you could end up in trouble.
Yes, no. We're going through a very challenging time with those kinds of things. And people are getting into trouble. I guess some professors even are being censored for using the wrong pronoun or something. No, I hope, but I don't know that this is going to happen. I hope this is just a fad that we're going to live through. But somehow I think I mentioned to you that Ismar Schorsch, when he was chancellor of the seminary and I was on this sexuality commission, came to us and said, "Oh, what are you worried about this homosexuality? It's such a small number of people. It's just a fad. It's going to go away."
But it's in your face today. We have not a bar, a bat mitzvah. We have a bee mitzvah.
Absolutely.
So,
I've seen,
I mean, this is really troublesome to me,
Well,
anyhow.
Well, I think those of us of an older generation have great difficulty with these things. Yeah, I think I told you once when I was at Oberlin College and at a meeting of Hillel students, and before we started the meeting, everybody had to go around and say, what are their pronouns? And one of the born males, I think he said she, or maybe he said they, but that's where we're at now. Yes, and Nelson.
Pardon me for being even more flippant, but Buber wrote a book about this, called it I, Thou.
Okay.
Martin Buber, I, thou.
Yes.
Pronouns are important, I'm sorry. Whether we make too much of them or not, whether this will last or not, another question.
Well,
But the young people, want to know, and it's like these women who want to participate in a lever of marriage. They need to know going into a marriage whether it's changing. The family wants to research to see what she's really eligible for, and are they really eligible to be married? And the announcing your pronouns is just another step in that direction. I
do think that there's somehow every day in the paper there's something that that I read either in an obituary or in a feature article or something else, where this business of sexual orientation and this mess that we're in is highlighted, it's of course now become a very political kind of thing, and people are using this as a weapon in the political wars. So you have teachers who now are being told what you can't talk about in class. It's going way out of whack, and many school systems, I don't know what the situation is in Cleveland, but many school systems are short of teachers. Teachers are being threatened, and they don't. I think people are just not going into teaching. So we're going to be in trouble if we don't solve some of this. Karen.
So I'm taking it back, I'm sorry, to my original question of what was the difference of the no chalitza or no yibum versus going out. Nelson, I don't know if you meant to, you just answered it. The woman needs to know going in. If she were to marry one of these brothers and have a child with him, and then they decided that that was not a legitimate marriage, that kid, no? Isn't that?
Yes,
isn't
that
that
would
a
be
good-
awful.
Yeah.
Then we'd really have mamzerut. That's something that we want to avoid.
No, but when Nelson said she needs to know going in, it was like a light bulb. You pinpointed it. Thank you.
Well, you do, yes. No, but obviously, we have a conflict, and that's what they're trying to work around. The laws of incest and the laws of yibum. They're in conflict. They can be in conflict. If and that's what they're dealing with. The possibility of conflict. You have 2 sisters, 3 brothers, and none of the brothers can marry 2 sisters. That is forbidden. However, the 3rd woman, who is not related, well, yes, the brothers can marry her. So that's what they're dealing with.
Rabbi, I wonder to what extent are there discussions on the highest levels of the conservative movement regarding sexuality and rulings they're making about that? And I wonder to what extent those rulings might be contrary to what is read on Yom Kippur prior to Ne'ilah about sexual prohibitions. I just wonder, and maybe, and also if there are discussions, how much disagreement there might be among people involved in those discussions. We're talking about the conservative movement.
If you look at the Machzor, I think I've mentioned this before, for the Torah reading for Mincha and Yom Kippur, you will find an alternative reading. Some congregations do not read the laws of incest, which includes a man lying with another man is an abomination. There are conservative congregations that read the alternative reading because they don't want to read that. And in fact, truth of the matter is the alternative reading is far more appropriate to the spirit of Yom Kippur as it's observed today than is the traditional reading. I think I mentioned to you that the traditional reading of the laws of incest, no doubt, was chosen because of the ceremony that would took place, according to the Mishnah, 2 times a year, on Tu B'Av and on Yom Kippur. The unmarried young women would go out to the orchards in borrowed white dresses, and the unmarried men would go after them. It was kind of a Sadie Hawkins day. It was a big celebration. And I'm pretty sure that that's why these laws of incest were chosen for Yom Kippur. The alternative reading is one that is far more to our understanding of Yom Kippur today. So the conservative movement is dealing with this, as with so much else, on a more or less congregation by congregation basis. That is, there are congregations where they're more liberal and more flexible, and other congregations that are less so. There is, we're playing catch up, as religion tends to do anyhow. The society is moving, and we're playing catch up. As I
For
mentioned,
those that have a traditional orientation, I think it's readings like the alternative one that you refer to, Rabbi, may result in the loss of affiliation in the conservative movement. People may move more toward reform, which I think is very, very sad.
well, you know my opinion on that. um, my view of that is that the vast majority of members of most conservative congregations are reform already. They never became conservative. They are not observant. They are not knowledgeable. They don't observe Shabbat. They don't observe Kashrut. They come 3 times a year, and they don't stay for the whole service. They stay for, an hour, 2 hours, whatever it is, the sermon plus Yizkor, and out they go. So
It would
it's fine.
seem to me there's an obligation on the part of the people who have clerical positions to be very clear about whatever conservative Judaism represents, so that these people who are doing what you're saying will do it based on information, not just on assumption.
Well, I want to tell you that if, the joke about the president of the congregation who talks to the new rabbi and says, Rabbi, in our congregation, you better not talk about kashrut. You better not talk about Shabbat, because our people, they're not into that.
Too dangerous.
So he talks about adultery, and the president goes mad.
I think Steve is going
Steve.
crazy there.
Yes, Steve.
So as you know, Rabbi Lettofsky, Beth Tzedek for a generation was the largest synagogue out of over 800 in the conservative movement. I'm the second bar mitzvah there in 1955. And on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, when there were 3,500 people there in the sanctuary, they weren't in the sanctuary. 500 to 800, in my estimation. It grew the numbers over the years from the days of Stuart Rosenberg into Ben Freeberg and to Rabbi Baruch Friedman Cole. It grew in numbers exponentially every year till times I estimated that there could have been even close to 1,000, maybe 800 people schmoozing out in the lobby. Conservative Jews, as you say, dear Rabbi. Conservative Judaism, the evidence is there. In the class of 1996, when Jennifer Elkin graduated 25 years ago, there were 25 graduates of the JTS. I counted the pictures she just posted. And this year, Elliot doesn't want me even to tell the rest of the group the number, but we're a closed group. People entering the JTS. So this is distressing news.
Well, one of my favorite statements is change is inevitable. The only problem is that growth is optional. And sometimes nothing stays the same. I keep saying this all the time. There is no such thing as stasis in this universe. The only thing that doesn't change is dead. If it's alive, it's going to change. It's either going to grow or it's going to shrink. It doesn't stay the same. Either we're going to progress or we're going to regress. And what has happened at least in the American Jewish community, Canada is behind us. That's not a negative statement. That's a positive statement from my perspective. But in America, synagogue, I just heard a story yesterday from my daughter of a rabbi of a very big conservative congregation who is considering leaving the rabbinate in order to go into another kind of Jewish communal position. And I said, what? And she said, yeah, he reads, he knows what's happening to synagogues, and he wants out. The synagogues that our parents and grandparents built, these big buildings in the post-Second World War era, are most of the time pretty empty, even on Shabbat. It wasn't always that way. I remember growing up, and on Friday night, there was a big crowd. Wasn't my crowd, but there was a big crowd there. And on Shabbos morning, there was a big crowd. They weren't the same people all the time, because on Friday night it was Reform, and on Saturday morning it was Orthodox. That's what made it conservative. Today, the Friday night service is basically more or less the same as Thursday night. People saying Kaddish and people who come all the time, plus a few more. But it's not a big deal. And at least in most congregations. And Shabbos morning, it's again, the numbers aren't what they used to be. And I don't, and the statistics of young people are very, very discouraging in terms of institutional Judaism. I want to make that clear. In terms of Jewish identity, one of the fascinating things that I read recently is that the number of intermarried couples raising Jewish children has gone way up. It used to be very small percentage of intermarried people raised their children as Jews. It's now up to something like 2/3 are raising Jewish children. Even
Rabbi,
though
what I've read is if the mother is Jewish, there is a greater likelihood of raising their children Jewish as opposed to the father.
that is true. That is true. But I know also many cases where the father is Jewish and the mother is raising the kids Jewish, even though she isn't Jewish. I know a number of cases like that. I think I mentioned to you, I had a couple cases in the West Temple of women coming to convert. Later on, their kids had celebrated bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs, and they came to me, they said, I want to convert. And I said, what, all of a sudden you want to convert? And they said, yes, I've raised Jewish children. I've had a Jewish home. I want to be Jewish. So that is an increasingly common thing, but it's new. It's new. That's change, but it's not necessarily negative. I won't know that it's positive, but it certainly isn't as negative as we thought. Yes, Nelson.
The other change, I saw this at BJ, is such intermarried couples being welcome in a conservative shul. It used to be if you were intermarried, you had to be Reformed if you were going to be involved in any kind of Jewish institution. But not anymore, and that's a positive sign, my opinion.
You may think it's positive, others disagree with you, but I think what happened, I think I mentioned this, one of the reasons that I chose to serve the West Temple was that I felt that the conservative movement had put its head in the sand, was still fighting the intermarriage problem, and was pushing people who were intermarried away. And where were they pushing them? Out. Out. I felt at that time, this is going back to the 90s already, that that was a mistake. That we have to reach out to them, teach them, bring them in, welcome them with the hope that the next generation, they'll raise their kids as Jews. Now, one of the real problems is, I don't know what the statistics are now, but 20 or so years ago, when I did know the statistics, the intermarriage rate of children of intermarried couples is way up. So we're dealing with some challenges that have never, ever been part of our tradition. And for those of us who are older, it's a real challenge. But I have to tell you, the Federation in Cleveland, and not only in Cleveland, we have this thing called J-Hub, where we have people working with these intermarried couples. One of them was at shul last week. They're on their way to Israel. Honeymoon, sending young intermarried couples to Israel and giving them a real strong sense of what it means to be a Jew. And spending a lot of money doing it because the trips are, if they're not free, they're almost free. And you know, the number of the staff, I can know by the staff of Jacob, it started with one person. I think they now have 3 or 4 staff people. It's a growing business. And that's the future, whether we like it or not, in my view. I don't like it, but that's our future. Okay, next week, Im Yirtzeh Hashem, we'll do another Mishnah, maybe 2, finish this chapter and go on, regrettably. Hopefully it'll be less complicated, but I will bring you Mishnah Torah to see how Maimonides presents this, and I think you'll find it far more to our liking, far more to the way we think than the way the Mishnah is formulated. Take care, everyone. Stay well. No COVID, Bob. Take care.
Take care.